soldiers. What's the scariest thing that ever happened to you? Was on a helicopter for a re-enlistment. The flight was supposed to be about 3 hours long. After about an hour they decided to cancel the rest of the flight so they could use the helicopter for training. Upon return they did a quick inspection to see the tail rotor disconnect was almost completely sheared. Had we have been on the flight any longer, that aircraft would have gone in a downward spiral and would have ruined a lot of people's day. So back about almost 5 years ago, our battalion was doing a training exercise out in 29 Palms ITX. Those who've been there know what it's about. So there's an exercise on Machine Gun Hill where gunners and mortarmen practice support by fire. Couple of rotations of groups later, one of our guys has a backspasm and ends up falling down the hill a short distance. Get a call for evac due to the injury and our corpsman jumps in the medical truck. Mind you, at this time, the mortar teams is mid-fire mission with live ammo, so our corpsman tells the driver, who we found out later didn't know the route to the due to not being briefed, started towards the hill. The driver starts driving to the hill where the mortars are dropping. A few of us are watching this and start to question whether they were going the right way or not. About 5 seconds after saying that, a mortar drops pretty damn close to the truck and me and about 5-6 of us got up and started running to the mortar position, screaming ceasefire over and over again. Good news is nobody got hurt on the truck, but it was decorated with some new pieces of shrapnel. I swear, all our hearts were in our throats after that. Never had I covered 200-300 meters so quickly in my life. Had to go through an abandoned hospital in Baghdad at night back in '04, was some real Silent Hill stuff. Hated every minute of it. Not me, but my cousin, who I wish like heck was still with me. He used to talk to me sometimes about his time in the service. I guess it was like therapy for him. It was early on in his long career. He was in an APC of some sort, and their column, or whatever you call it, was stopped during a massive dust storm. He said they were stuck in it for what felt like ages, and he eventually had to pee. He gets outside, goggles on, unable to see his own hand in front of his face, had to figure out how to piss in the middle of a dust storm. He ends up getting turned around, and spent the next 15 minutes trying to find his way back to the stopped vehicles. He said it was one of the scariest things that he'd experienced, worrying that he was going to stumble onto some bad dudes and end up bagged and held hostage. In 2006, I was riding a Chinook from Balad to Kuwait. It was dead of night and we were landing for refueling. Well, somehow, someway, the pilot lost control of the aircraft for a few hundred feet as we were descending. He recovered before we crashed. Obviously, I was on my way home. Since I'd already been in theater a year, and got shot at more times than I could count, there was a moment, about 100 years long, that I thought I was going to die in a helicopter crash at some shithole in southern Iraq. It was unpleasant. The worst part was the look on the face of the crew chief, a guy who'd spent a lot of time in the air and knew what was what. The best part was hearing the veteran warrant officer scream at the captain who was flying when we finally got to Kuwait. I had it really good compared to most, I acknowledge that 100%. However, I was in Djibouti, visiting an ATM. Stay with me. Cushy ass job in the DJ. I know got caught. Lol. I turn around and a little kid is pointing a gun at me. It took a second to realize it was Toy. For half a second I hoped my mama was sure I loved her with all my soul. I did some deployments, didn't do hard time, but that moment has stayed with me all the years since as a reminder to be aware of every single thing around me. Well, I've seen my dad cry twice, once at his mother's funeral, once at the Vietnam War Memorial all in DC, when he found the names of friends that died in his arms. Being out in the jungle shooting at trees not knowing where the enemy was must have been scary as F. On a training exercise in my combat engineer training I fell asleep on stag sentry duty in the prone position for what must have been 20 seconds. Woke up to my staff sergeant looking down on me as he must have thought I was sleeping. Luckily enough a twig snapped as he walked towards me and my neck shot to the left to see his boots right by my face. Got away with it that day, but I definitely didn't fall asleep again during that sentry duty, as this big powerlifter of a bloke would no doubt have ducked me up had he caught me. I worked it out afterwards. The exercise was 88 hours long and I was awake for 86 hours, so 2 hours sleep in total over the course of 4 days whilst digging trenches, doing bridge demolitions, bridge building, creating water points and doing a 10-mile run-in at the end. Sappers will know what I mean down at Gib British Army. Falling asleep standing up is not fun. Got a chance to work alongside the SAS at 1.2 for their training exercises playing as enemy. The speed in which they move and can overwhelm your position is incredibly scary. Proper sound lads as well, which made the week quite enjoyable, but Christ, they are made of different stuff, them soldiers. Side note, getting shot at was pretty scary as well. I was a tank mechanic with H8 identifier, and a month after basic and 8 I was with the 1st A.D. 501st FSB attached to the 1st MEV in our Ramadi from May 6th to April 7th. The whole tour scared the shit out of me, with many recovery missions, mortar attacks, and being convoy support with IEDs going off. Took me 12 years to seek help and was diagnosed with 70% PTSD by the VA. I tear up just thinking about it as I write this post. Mortar ricocheted 30 feet away from me, flew past and never detonated. Had a round ricochet off some cinder blocks next to me, which then caught me in the front of my helmet. I don't know if it was the force of the round or my reaction, but I spun face first into the little wall I was behind. That cut me a bit, so now I'm thinking I got shot in the ducking face. Took me a while to calm down from that. For a brief second there I thought my 18-year-old ass was gonna die on some unnamed street in the shithole that was Fallujah, Iraq. I was in Afghanistan when it was still a very dangerous place to be deployed to. I've seen so much death that by the end of the deployment, moving a dead body had as much emotional impact on me as moving a pile of sandbags. I know very well the sounds a child makes when he's about to die, and I can never forget those sounds because they come back every time I dream. I know what it feels like when people are trying to kill you. I know what it feels like when all you can do is wait for the explosions to stop and hope that nothing hits you. The most fear I've ever felt was after I came home. I drew the lucky straw and had the chance to be on the first flight home. A couple of weeks before the last flight, while I was sitting at home with my wife and daughter, I found out that there was an attack on the base, and that communication from that base was blacked out. That means that someone was killed or wounded, and the army needed to contact the family before letting everyone else call home. When I was overseas and we were attacked, it wasn't fear I felt, it was a call to action. But sitting safely at home knowing that my brothers were still fighting and dying without me was terrifying. When there was no action to be taken, the only thing left was fear. To this day, wanting to be on the first flight out is my greatest shame. I'd give anything to trade places with the ones who came back in the cargo hold so that they could take my place in the seat. To all the people thanking me for my service, thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. After I got home from the grueling 15 months of combat in Fallujah during the surge, I would wake up sweating and shaking with nightmares of Ranger School. I was the platoon leader for a security detail in Iraq. We were pimped out to another unit and lived with them. They stuck us in this old shit building right next to their TOC command post. It was like a Soviet Khrushchevka used in nuclear bomb tests. They didn't think much of us and the feeling was mutual. Now, I won't say which unit this was, but it's one of the more well-known divisions that has an absolute boner for their own pomp and circumstance. Part of that was their ornate guidon unit flag. This ducking thing was garish as heck. It almost looked like a Christmas decoration, but it was theirs and they were proud of it, so whatever. Their guys and my guys were just endlessly ducking with each other. Standard fare in Iraq. I heard through the grapevine that mine were planning some elaborate heist to boost their guidon. Joe, so I never got involved. For weeks, they were actively planning this shit in between work. They even made little sand tables and rehearsed. About a month after first catching wind, it was the furthest thing from my mind. One morning, I get a firm knock on my door. It was my own platoon sergeant and one of the squad leaders, both of which I came up with and have always been close friends. The platoon sergeant, in his East Texas drawl, says in a haunting tone, "Hey, the unit commander is looking for you, some shit about a guida, you might wanna get over there because he's having a case of the ass." Y'all, I went from in bed in skivvies to in a uniform with a fresh shave without ever hitting the ground. I mean, I am throwing myself together as if, well, I am about to get the ass ripping of the century. After dabbing my dry shave wounds and grabbing my shit, I shove right between these two who are standing outside my door. I am at a sprint when the squad leader, in his own drawl, says, "All relaxed and shit, now we're ducking with ya, let's go get breakfast." To this day they duck with me about that. Trigger warning, Canadian Infantry, Sept 2nd maybe Sept 3rd 2006 Panjwai Village, Afghanistan. In the weeks prior, we airdropped leaflets in the village telling everyone, if you're not Taliban, get out because we're coming through, and if you're still there when we do, you're considered an enemy combatant and will be dealt with as such. We were mechanized infantry set up in firing formations to block exits from the village at that point. I was on the ground at the front corner of the vehicle watching our section's arcs with vector binos as the rest of the section sorted out ammo etc. As we wait for orders to move, was still going to be a day or so before we advanced. Boom. Felt like I got hit in the back with a baseball bat, ears ringing, dust everywhere, body stinging all over my backside. At first I thought a grenade got mishandled or something and detonated while the guys were sorting stuff. Nope. Ambush from the flank, the entire company stood to and returned fire of course. 5 guys from my section were injured in the blast. 82mm recoilless rifle. Fortunately it was an anti-tank round and impacted about 5 feet short of the vehicle, or most of my section would be dead, probably including me. However, we just got showered with dirt and rock shrapnel, with little bit of metal. It hit about 10 feet behind where I was standing, covered the back of my legs, my ass, back of my arms and even back of my neck with shrapnel. Our Section 2 crew commander jumped in the driver's hatch, his driver qual still valid. Our gunner took command of the turret by himself and I took the radio in the back after loading the other wounded into the vehicle. One guy we thought had a puncture to his femoral artery as he was bleeding a ton right at his groin. Fortunately that was not the case. Unfortunately we caused him a lot of pain because we put a ton of pressure on him there. It ended up being a piece of shrapnel that went through his scrotum, so it bled a lot but wasn't life-threatening, sorry Matty. So we limped back to the fob with our injured on 4-8 shredded tires while the rest finished the firefight. I was out of commission, healing at the airfield for about 2 weeks before I went back to rejoin the section. Then about 2 months later I stepped on a landmine, but that's another story. Was doing some refresh training with some new guys on pretty standard call for fire missions with white phosphorus from 81mm mortars one day. We knew that our target range wasn't far from another range where some engineers were doing C4 training. Had my guy call in a mission and observed 2 rounds hit, and while looking for the 3rd round noticed it landed way off target right into the next door range. Called ceasefire on the radio and that a round had landed on possible friendlies. Heard the mortar line about 100 meters away, started screaming orders, sent a runner for the FSO, and then called range control. Had a truck barreling out to the range to see what got hit. Was pretty concerned we may have hit someone, or at least scared the shit out of some guys. Turns out the engineers left the range 30 minutes prior and it was empty. Was wondering whose ass was getting smoked and found out later one of the motormen left an extra C charge on the round. He got injured and everyone got some extra training. Good day. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.